In this video, we'll build up the tools we need to convert a range of natural language questions into valid SQL queries. We will do this by combining strings, but in many cases, it might make sense to write these more complicated queries using a Python module that's written specifically to interact with your database or API. We will use string operations in these exercises because they're the most general approach, but that doesn't mean that this is the best way to do it in your particular case. We want to generate queries that correspond to the following kinds of messages. Show me a great hotel. I'm looking for a cheap hotel in the south of town. Anywhere, so long as it's central. We don't know beforehand which criteria users are going to ask for, and so this adds a little bit of complexity to how we write our queries. First, let's extract the query parameters from a message. We have an interpreter object, which has an already trained RASA-NLU model loaded. We pass the message to interpreter.parse to get the intent and entities. Now we'll initialize an empty dictionary called params, and we'll save the entities as key value pairs in there. To do this, we iterate over the entities in the data dictionary and use the entities as keys and the values as values in the params dictionary. Each of our queries has the same base query, select name from hotels. Recall that to filter the results, we add a where clause with a filter like location equals north. The entities we extract from the user request correspond to the filters we want to apply. So we create a list of filters by iterating over the keys in the params dictionary and creating a string with the name of the entity, an equal sign, and a question mark. The values will be added later when we call execute. Since there are multiple filters to be applied, we define a string called conditions, which contains all of the filters with the string and in between. We use the string's join method for this, which takes a list of strings as its sole argument. We can use the string's join method again to glue together the base query and the conditions with a where keyword. We save the final query string as final Q. If our SQL is not valid, the execute function will return an error message. Now, we want to give appropriate responses depending on what we found in the database. If nothing was found, we might say something like, I'm sorry, I couldn't find anything like that. But if we found more results than we would like to show, we should also indicate that to the user. We could say something like, this is one option, but I know of others too. To map these responses to the number of results, we can put them in a list and use the number of results as the index to choose a response. To use the final list element as a catch-all, we can use the min function. This chooses the smallest value out of its arguments. The index is then set by calling min with the number of results and the index of the final element of the list, keeping in mind that Python lists are zero indexed. You can then use the string's format method to insert the actual result from the database.